Welcome to this Killick Explains video, and welcome to a fresh series, a three-part series on investment scams. This is part one, Could It Be You? Now what we're going to cover is the fact that according to the FOS, that's the Financial Ombudsman Service, scams, based on the number of complaints they've received, have hit a 6-year high. There are literally thousands of them happening simultaneously, and that's a function of several things which I'll come to in a moment. Many of these scams have online origins now. It's the digital world that we all have to live in. So what I'm going to cover across this series is who can be targeted, and the answer is a lot of us potentially these days. How's it done? Coming up later. And what should we all be doing about it to make sure we're not on that FOS list of people who've been scammed? Okay, so the backdrop to today's presentation is essentially a lot of people think, I don't need to listen to this, it won't happen to me. But actually, the number of risk areas where you are open to being scammed is increasing all the time. Online, going to come back to some of these, social media, all right, there's the barrage of investment opportunities, whether single stocks through apps, whether cryptocurrencies, and there's the fact that there are relatively few controls out there in the digital world provided by the people who run the platforms. So there's plenty of scope for scammers to get sort of under the radar, if you like, or through your defences. And what I want to focus on here is who is a potential victim, because there's a perception out there that the victims of scams are elderly, often lonely people living by themselves, vulnerable, as it's called, to being targeted. But the reality is, yes, those people, like my mum, for example, who I'm constantly warning about scams, are on the target list. But it isn't just the elderly and the lonely. If I run through some other criteria, are you young and naive? All right, you just don't know much about financial markets and about scamming techniques, which can be incredibly sophisticated. Are you just desperate to make some money? Cost of living crisis. Is there a way I can make a fast buck? Could I clear my student loans quickly? If someone put an opportunity in front of me that looks credible, would I fall for it? Are you just plain bored? That was a problem during the pandemic. Lots of people got sucked in simply because they wanted something to do and the online world seemed to offer it. Are you greedy? All right, now this is getting a bit close to the bone, but are you somebody looking to potentially make money without putting in too much effort? Are you just badly informed? All right, these financial scams can be quite sophisticated, quite jargon fueled, backed by some credible sounding people. Got to be careful. Are you a little bit overconfident? Won't happen to me. I'll make a quick buck, take it off the table, no problem. And or do you suffer from fear of missing out? And the whole digital world is designed to get you fearful of missing out. And scammers can take advantage of that when presenting opportunities. Now, how do they get you? All right, well, first of all, they identify you as vulnerable. And what I'm suggesting is that vulnerable, which is actually an FCA term, a regulator's term, is a much wider pool of people than just the sort of cliche, as I say, that elderly person, potentially lonely, looking for somebody to talk to. It's a much wider pool than that. So how are they going to get to you? And the answer used to be through some fairly basic methods. But now they've got voice-activated calling, and AI, unfortunately, opens up even more scope for somebody to call my mum, sounding like me, but actually a scammer. Watch out for those in the future. Visits, that's where somebody turns up, knocks at your front door, says, I'm offering a service, could be anything from plumbing to roofing to changing your boiler over, you name it, smart meters. What they're really trying to do is get access to your property and your financial details via a friendly sounding, helpful conversation. Email is a classic, all right. Text messages are becoming more popular. False websites, there's the whole web domain. You think you're looking at your bank's website, you're actually not. And of course, all the social media channels, all right, and there are plenty of them. And because we spend hours, in some cases, scrolling through social media sites on our phones, scammers know we're vulnerable to that line of attack, and they know the level of control is relatively weak, potentially. Now, you might be thinking, I don't care, I know all this, they're not going to get to me. But scammers can make a lot of money out of their victims and are therefore incentivized to do it well. They can be incredibly persistent. They don't take no for an answer. They don't stop sending text messages. They don't stop sending emails. All right, they don't stop calling. They don't stop knocking on the front door. They can be charming. All right, they can lull you into a false sense of security. And lonely people in particular are potential targets for that kind of charm. They're quite happy to deploy blackmail if they want to, and we'll come back to that in a future video. And of course, a multi-channel approach, hitting you from all sides. Let's try hitting Tim with emails, texts, web approaches, and so on. All right, so they're prepared to deploy a lot of patience. Okay, they've had a lot of practice. I mean, boiler room scams, as they're called. These are people with a script, all right, that sounds incredibly smooth and incredibly credible when they're dressing themselves up as HMRC, for example. Come back to that in part 2 and 3. And some of these scams are getting pretty sophisticated, just in terms of the use of technology, voice mapping, for example, using AI, and all the kind of product that they're trying to push. So, don't think you could not become a scam victim. Be alert to the fact that the expression vulnerable covers a much wider pool of people than perhaps you think it does. And then I would watch part 2 coming up, which is going to be about how all of this stuff actually works. And then crucially part 3, how you can stop it happening to you. For related video content, by the way, do pop over to killik.com/resources. There you can also get a copy of our quarterly magazine Confidant, where occasionally the topic of scamming and anti-scam measures comes up. And of course, there are my guides, one of which is sitting next to me. And again, killik.com/resources, or pop an email to editor@killik.com.